Looks like that has happened. Great. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand over to George Gibson from Streetwave, who's going to talk to us about how understanding mobile signal coverage across your local area can have a real impact on how you deliver public services. George, it's over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Suzanne. And, thank you very much for everyone joining today. So as a bit of introduction, my name is George Gibson. I'm one of the co-founders and partnership director for Streetwave. I've been responsible for sort of managing this project with Caerphilly from Streetwave side, and I'm joined today by Karen Williams from Caerphilly. Karen, do you want to quickly introduce yourself so everyone knows who you are?
Yeah, afternoon everyone. I'm Karen Williams. I'm the Customer Services Manager for Caerphilly County Borough Council. So I look after all of customer services, but I also look after our innovation and transformation team. And I'm actually working on the Mobilising Team Caerphilly project at the moment, which is all about the lens of the customer and how we can improve our services for all our customers. So this project has played a key part for us, which we'll explain as we go along.
Perfect. Thanks, Karen. So to start with the webinar, I always think it's really important to explain sort of the purpose and who can benefit from joining today. And this project that we've done, mapping mobile coverage across Caerphilly, I think there's sort of three main areas where people can benefit, because I appreciate there's people from lots of different councils and departments here today. The first section of who it's relevant for is people who are interested in digital connectivity. We've mapped the mobile coverage, so if your role is sort of helping residents get better connected, this is the right webinar for you. But connectivity also has other sort of areas which it benefits. So if you're interested in economic growth or regeneration, we have use cases here today around that sort of area, as well as if you're interested in improving productivity for your staff. Obviously, there's lots of budgetary pressures on the councils at the moment, and we have some use cases here as well. So hopefully that gives you a sort of high level view of if this webinar is relevant. As a bit of sort of an introduction to what Streetwave is and where we've come from, we were founded about 2.5 years ago out of a Welsh government-based incubator called the Allwch Foundation down in Newport. This incubator effectively looks at some of the big challenges that are faced by society. So it goes out every year and it speaks to businesses, government, charities, and just asks, what are your problems that you're facing? And every year it gets a list of sort of 50 challenges, which it then gives to graduate entrepreneurs to create businesses to solve. And the challenge that Streetwave was given originally was around mobile connectivity, and the fact that as a society, everybody is dependent on mobile connectivity when we're out and about, whether it's working, navigating, paying for stuff, staying safe with emergency calls. People use it all the time. But unlike other forms of critical national infrastructure, we don't have the mobile coverage across the country accurately mapped. So with roads and gas pipelines and electrical systems, we understand fully how this infrastructure works. But when it comes to mobile connectivity, there's still a sort of opaqueness, which means people are often procuring networks blind, and they're not able to understand where you're living or where you're working, which is the best operator to use. And so we spent a year in Alacrity sort of building up our capabilities to start building this mobile coverage map. And then we came out, and obviously every startup has this problem, which is who's the early adopter, who's going to be the innovator. And we were fortunate enough to find Karen and Caerphilly, who wanted to take in us as a sort of project partner and innovate and showcase to other Welsh local authorities as well as UK ones how we can improve the situation. So without further ado, Karen, if I start sharing my screen, are you able to explain sort of originally why Caerphilly was interested in mapping mobile coverage and how we went about collecting this data?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, George. So as George said, we have been one of the early adopters, and we were fortunate to also find George of somebody that we could work with in regards to this. I don't know how much any of you know about Caerphilly, but we're quite a large borough. But in terms of the demographic wise of the borough, we stretch to the north, you know, up to the heads of the valleys, up towards Brecon Beacons National Park, right down to the south then to bordering Cardiff and Newport. So in terms of the borough itself, we have some very urban areas, but we have quite a lot of very rural areas that you know, struggle in terms of coverage and things as well. So we wanted to understand that data a little bit more. We know that we have some very deprived areas in Caerphilly. And as I said, part of the project that I'm working on at the moment is around mobilising Team Caerphilly, and that's in regards to all the savings that local authorities have to make in the next few years. As an authority, like many businesses out there, you know, our focus is digital first. That's going to be one of our drivers for massive savings. You know, we're trying to drive residents to be digital and to access our service digitally. We want to be a 24/7 council, but we recognise that as a local authority, or certainly within our area, there are pockets of the borough which struggle with digital connection and mobile coverage, and we really wanted to understand that a little bit more, because if we were going to try and drive people digitally, we need to understand, can they connect? Because otherwise it's not going to work, and it's not going to reduce our our spend down. We want to make it easier for our workers. You know, since COVID, a lot of our workers now are working from home. So what is the impact that mobile coverage has for them at home? A lot of our workers are out on the street, you know, a non-office space. And so we really wanted to understand that the information in regards to that. You know, we've got 2,000 mobile workers in the authority, and we are looking to expand that in terms of not stopping people coming into the office, but why do people need to come into the office to print out jobs? They should just be able to download their work out and about. But we've already recognised that there was issues with the mobile connectivity that they were using that was stopping that. And when we look at through the lens of a customer, it was becoming very frustrating for our residents, because sometimes they weren't getting the updates real time. So we were looking at it from our internal way in terms of devices. How can we make those much better? How can we make those more reliable for our staff that are out working there? We also understand that, you know, Caerphilly as an economy, or even us working from home, mobile coverage doesn't just affect Caerphilly workers, it also affects the local economy. It also affects, you know, people, as I said, people working from home every day. And we wanted to understand that information and how that impacts as well. And then our residents, you know, not just from the benefit of our residents being able to digitally connect, but also are they understanding that and spending money on contracts that particularly on mobile phones that don't meet their needs. So we've kind of taken all that into account when we started working in with George, and that's kind of every angle that we wanted to come from, you know, us as an authority, the local economy, but also our residents. And that's where we see that we are doing this more for, is our residents, and to making their lives better and making their accessibility to digital and mobile coverage better as well. So that's where we sort of came from, and what we when we started working with George and Streetwave was sort of our high level brief of what we wanted to understand and get information on. And that's what we've done then to put the the devices onto the tracks. I couldn't think of the word then, apologies. So what we have done is, as part of this, we have put a device onto every food and green waste track. So there's a track that goes out to every property every week, or every street every week, and drives round. And there's a device on every single one of them that collects data every week for us. It collects data, it picks up on the mobile signal for the 4 major mobile operators, so EE, Vodafone, 3 and O2. So as it drives down around our streets doing the collections, it collects that data for us. It picks up things like the signal strength, and it picks up lots of information for us. And then that data gets uploaded into the cloud. And we get to see that data weekly, and we can track it. We can see if there's any, how the mobile networks are performing. We can compare to how they were over the last year, and we can really drill down into streets and areas to see what is the best mobile connectivity in our area, and has it changed at all over the last year. You know, we've been talking with the Northern Valleys region about how we can use this data to improve connectivity, not just for Caerphilly, but for the wider, you know, Northern Valleys as well. So that's where we have been using the data. And that's what we're using it for. We're doing an exercise now, as I said, in-house. We've been reviewing our mobile contract as a whole for Caerphilly. We've been looking at how that is, you know, we knew how it was performing, but we've been looking at in regards to the data that we've had via Streetwave. We've just done some work in regards to that contract, but part of the work that we are doing now is we are really drilling down into this data. And when we are looking at who our mobile workers are, where are they based, we are now looking at whether an alternative provider may be more beneficial for that pocket of people. So rather than now, we'll be trying to be more proactive. Rather than having one standalone contract as an authority, we're actually moving to now that we may have multiple mobile contracts, and depending on where those teams are based, because our staff do tend to be based in a specific area. So you may have an environmental health worker that covers the south, and then one at the north. They shouldn't necessarily need to be on the same network, because we have identified there is a significant difference in the providers across there. You know, there's one provider that's very strong in the north and one that's very strong in the south. And, you know, that's very new to us as a local organisation. We tend to just go for one provider and just get on with it, where we've recognised now that actually that doesn't work, and we need to start working differently, and we are really drilling down into that data now, and we're starting to roll out different connectivity to our internal staff, to allow them to function better, to allow them to be able to have that data to hand that they can upload and download and get on with their daily work without losing all the productivity time that they are at the moment. One of the other things then that we want to do at the moment, or certainly in the future, is how we share that with our residents as well. Certainly we'll be looking at how we can share that with the residents, so they can look and do a little postcode checker to see, well, what is the best mobile network in my street? You know, what should I be looking at if I'm looking for a new contract? So they sort of our next aspirations once we've solved this little issue at the moment. Sorry, and I'll talk forever, so I'll let George carry on.
So Karen, why don't we show the view before we did the project, and how like connectivity was understood, and then we can go through all of those aspects that you've just discussed in the showcase, exactly what we've been doing. So before Caerphilly actually started any project with Streetwave, they, like most councils and residents and businesses, were using the operators coverage checkers. So these are checkers that are on their website, so you can go to EE or O2 or Vodafone or 3, and you can check their coverage across the areas you're interested in. So Caerphilly, they had 2,000 staff, and they chose an operator based on, you know, a good price that they were given and also good service that they were promised. So here we can see the operator's coverage checker in Caerphilly town, for example, stating that they estimate there was good indoors and outdoor coverage across the region. The problem with these coverage checkers, and this is something that Ofcom have also flagged, and they know it is an issue, is their mathematical approximations. So they don't collect data on the ground. They look at where they have masts, they look at the power and the spectrum that they're using, and they estimate we roughly have coverage across these locations, whatever they are. And often the experience on the ground is different, because you have attenuation from things like buildings or trees getting in the way, blocking the signal. And there's other factors that affect it, like capacity issues. If there's lots of people go into an area, it sort of overload the networks and you can't get enough bandwidth to go around. So currently, you know, this is what people are procuring on. They're being told that, you know, these coverage checkers potentially have good connectivity. And when we actually went in with Caerphilly and placed the devices on the bin trucks in exactly the same location, this was what we found with the project. So the coverage checker was accurate in sort of the western and southern parts of the town, but we were seeing Lansbury Park and Castle Park two sort of housing estates in Caerphilly with lots of people living in them, where there was less than 1 megabit per second speeds. So again, you having people potentially procuring a network, signing up for 2 or 3 year contracts based on a promise that they're getting with the current situation. But with Caerphilly's project, we've innovated and shown actually you do need to sort of understand it on a really hyper local level. So one of the views that we've done, we allow Caerphilly now to sort of understand the individual networks. So we can look at, you're looking here, if you look at the top, O2's networks for download speeds, and you can see here, we're quite zoomed in, how we're sort of getting data across most of the streets where the bin trucks are collecting data. And you can see basically on a house by house level, what the level of service is from all of the operators. So we're sharing this screenshot because we actually had a resident get in touch with us complaining about his O2 signal. This is in Bedwas in sort of northern Caerphilly. And he was a business owner. He needed it for work. He was also a father who had 3 children, and he needed to have a good connectivity to make sure his children were safe as they're going to and from school. And then we were able to look between the different operators and showcase, well, actually, if you switch to EE in this case, there's good connectivity with speeds above 15 across most of your community. So again, you know, we're able to look at individual locations, where are the operators performing poorly, where are they performing well, and switch people so they're on the best networks in the locations that they're in. And who is the best network across Caerphilly really depends, like Karen was saying, on the specific region. So one of the other features that we developed, which Karen was mentioning, is this ability to look at the highest and the lowest performing networks. So we're a bit more zoomed out across the council here. We have a slightly different filter. So we're looking at comparable networks, the highest performing for download speed. And the way it works is whoever's got the fastest speed in an area, their colour gets shown. So we could really see across different areas, you know, we've got clusters of Vodafone performing well at Risca, Ystrad 3 is performing the best. Up in Blackwood, we're seeing EE's being the best. In some of these northern parts just off the screen, in Rumney, we're seeing O2 being the best. And so Karen is now working with her teams to say, okay, people who are social carers who are based in Blackwood, you should be on EE's network, whereas social carers in Ystrad, you should be on 3's network. And really having this dynamic procurement system, Caerphilly's the first council in the country to ever have this. We're really saving a lot of money, as Karen will show you later, with some of the benefits of this. And we can also show the lowest performing operators to avoid. So here you can see O2 and 3 each have patches where they're falling behind other operators. So in conversations with them, you can start to say, you know, you're falling behind, potentially you should start investing. And obviously this is relevant for the residents and businesses as well, because they want to understand who's the best or worst network in the locations they're living in. The final sort of view from a map perspective and on our GIS that's interesting for you guys today is our coverage and hotspots feature. So again, we have the ability to change the colours depending on certain aspects. So here we're looking at how many operators across Caerphilly have, in this case, download speeds, and we can customise this above 15 megabits per second. So we've set a threshold that's a really good level of service. You can do most use cases on it. And here you can start to see the locations in dark green where all 4 of the operators have great levels of service. So you can switch between them and get a good level of connectivity, regardless of who you choose. But you can also see the areas in light green and red where at least one or potentially all of the operators have no networks able to offer services across this level. So in these areas in green, Caerphilly is now able to say, okay, if you're having a complaint and having issues, there is an alternative and we'll let you know which is the best operator. But the areas in red, these are areas where there's no level of good connectivity from any operator. So there needs to be new infrastructure or upgrades to how the power levels so that we can improve this for the local people. And as Karen said previously with the bin trucks, we're able to get this data on a sort of monthly or a weekly basis. So looking at November, Caerphilly is now able to have conversations with the operators and talk about this. And when we actually compare it to March, a few months later, we've seen the operators, they've come in, they've made improvements, and the connectivity levels are better for the local residents. And so this is all fantastic, getting this on a map, but we've also tried to make it really actionable with graphs and charts. So converting this data into stuff that you can do reporting on. So when we look across Caerphilly Council, we can start to see what the average download speeds are for each of the operators. In this case, 3 and EE have about double the speeds of O2. And when it comes to upload speeds, the picture is, they're all pretty similar, all performing relatively well. But we've also been able to actually analyze this stuff on a address by address basis, both residential and commercial. And this is really important because a lot of telemetry devices, for example, this is one use case where they're monitoring vulnerable people to keep them out of care homes, for example. They depend on SIM cards to connect to the core network. And so Caerphilly, along with other councils, are able to look at each council and see which is the best network at every single home. So in this case, we're seeing 3 and EE are the best at sort of 13,000 homes, Vodafone at 5,000 and O2 at 1,000. So if you're procuring, again, dynamically on a house by house basis, you can look at this instead of buying the hardware, sending it to a home, putting the wrong network in, wrong SIM card in, and having no connectivity, which is obviously expensive and time consuming. And like I said, we can also show businesses this. So if you're looking at commercial property, you can also see who's the best in your region. The area we had complaints with and we wanted to innovate around was, this is all great looking across a council, but again, unless you're able to take residents and show them person by person on the GIS who's the best at their house, that's very time consuming and not efficient. So one of the things we've recently been developing with Caerphilly, and we're hoping to launch soon, is the coverage checker. So this is something that is going to go on Caerphilly's website. Residents will be able to see, along with their bins, along with their schools and roads, also the ability to check coverage across Caerphilly. And they're able to enter their postcode and enter their address. And for the first time in the UK, people will be able to see within a 30-meter radius at their specific address, as you can see here, what are the download and upload speeds for the operators. So again, we're taking this opaque industry and we're making it very transparent, because in this case, at this home, for example, EE has 30 times faster speeds than O2 and similar levels when it comes to upload speeds. And we really want to empower the residents so they can understand exactly the context. So we show them when was the last data collected, so how relevant is the data, and how many readings were taken, because obviously the smaller the data set, the less confident you are. But in this location, we got 778. So there's a lot of data backing up the claims that we're making here. And so we've done all of this, and it's had various different benefits. So Karen, just to finish the presentation, would you like to take everyone through specifically how these have helped Caerphilly and the wider region?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there have been far more than 4 for us, but these are sort of the 4 that we've covered mostly. Is one, it will be for our residents. We want to push people to digital, so we really needed to understand the digital coverage. So it will be about enabling our residents to be able to check their mobile coverage checker online to see what is best for them, what is the best contract, what provides the best value for money, and that as well. Massively as well, it's got to be around productivity savings for us, and also savings in regards to our contracts. We were paying, as you could imagine, as an authority, a lot of money on contracts, and sometimes that provider, you couldn't use it at all in parts of the borough. And it was just what we'd always been with. So we've really done, that for us, productivity savings is going to be massive. We really need those staff changes of work in practice. We want mobile workers out and about using technology, but using technology that works for them. It's very frustrating for workers when they're trying to work and they can't upload or download their work daily, and it then becomes frustrating for the resident because they're not getting those real-time updates. So, from a productivity savings point of view, we've estimated that we can save up to £325,000 a year just alone in that. Obviously, as George has shown you in regards to having lobbying for better coverage. We had worked with our existing provider to say, look, this is how bad the coverage is in some of the areas, and we have seen improvements, but there are still parts of the borough that are always going to be pocketed because of the topography of the authority and the layout. You know, we are very rural, we're very valleys, so we do have black spots with some, and where they're very good with others. It's certainly for our economy as well. You know, we're very passionate about empowering our businesses and things as well, and making sure that they get the best value for money and that they can work. And definitely for our health and safeguarding point of view, we are actually using this data and actually overlaying this data now with all our businesses, and certainly all our buildings that we own within Caerphilly. So certainly like our leisure centres, our homes, our residential homes, and we're overlaying what we know with those on a map, just to understand, well, what coverage is there. You know, we know that copper turn-off is going to have a massive thing. The PTSTN switch off is going to massively affect us. We really need to understand, well, what connectivity are these places going to have, and then allowing us to make better informed choices for those buildings. You know, we've got residential homes that are not on our network, so they do rely on mobile coverage. That's the only way that residents can, the residents of those homes can keep in touch with their family. So we want to be able to provide them with information just so that, you know, they get the best as well. So we are overlaying, we're using this data and overlaying it with some other things that we've got as well, so that we really get a bigger picture of Caerphilly in terms of not just mobile coverage, but what other coverage that we've got, what is connected into our network, and what other areas that we, perhaps buildings that we still own that are not affected, you know, not connected. How can we help them in terms of mobile coverage? So we are doing a lot of work in the background as well, you know, just using this data which isn't just alone with mobile. So it's a massive project for us and has the potential for even bigger savings and developments in the future.
Perfect. So I think that is everything. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. I appreciate there's a Q&A, so if you have any questions, even myself or Karen would love to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. That was really, really fascinating, and it's just so interesting to hear the kind of coverage of the benefits that the kind of information can bring. It's really, you know, it's really difficult to almost imagine how many departments within the local authority can actually benefit from this kind of thing. And you know, I think you've just started to touch on some of that today. That's really, really interesting. So obviously, as George said, if anyone's got any questions, please put them in the chat and we will come to them. I do have one question first, as is usually the case. And really, I think to George in this first instance, if a local authority wants to get on board with this and to work with Streetwave to get some of these insights and to do this data mapping, how would they go about it and what does that look like?
So there's multiple ways that we can really collect the data, and it all comes down to what's the cheapest, because obviously every council's stretched for budgets, and we just try and get as much data as possible for the budgets available. So we can either do, like we did in Caerphilly, the bin truck approach, where we put them on the bin trucks. I think we had about 12, wasn't it, Karen? Units that we installed.
We've got 12 units to go around.
Yeah. So generally that's sort of a slightly higher price because we have to buy all of the units and there's a lot of data costs, but that does give the authority the ability to sort of get every single address covered on a weekly basis. So over 12 months, you get a really good view. And then there's a sort of slightly cheaper alternative for generally smaller or mid-sized councils. So if you're interested in just a one-off snapshot, we can do a drive test where we'll drive all of the roads in the council, give you that one-time view, and it might be sort of a third of the price. But obviously the drawback is you don't get that repeated understanding. And particularly if you have things like capacity issues, you do want that sort of regular understanding of multiple views of what's happening over time.
Yeah, thank you. And in terms of what then the local authority can do with the data, are there any restrictions on that, or is it kind of not jointly owned necessarily, but are there restrictions on how it can be used, I guess is the question.
Yeah. So the way that we've also tried to innovate, which was different to the market previously, because there are other companies who've done this sort of mapping before, consultancies and crowdsourcers, and they would tend to have a model where the local authority would pay everything for the data. So they'd buy it, they'd pay 100% the cost and they'd own it. Whereas Streetwave is trying to have a new model where we own the data and we license it to councils. And basically what that allows is the council only pays 50% or a third of the price, because we'll sell it on to other customers. But then the council effectively gets a restriction-free license where you can do what you want with it as long as you don't sell it. And most councils, they want it just to be able to lobby and to help residents and all of these benefits. So you effectively get all of the benefits of owning it while also getting it at a cheaper price.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat from somebody who we've spoken to before, Philip Burrows. It says, are the boxes mounted in the cab of the bin lorry or externally, as there's been concern about the available space in the cabs? A very specific question.
So with the vehicles, we have the ability to sort of do different solutions. So often with waste collection departments, they'll have the sort of the big trucks. So you have your Dennis's, your Mercedes, your vehicles like this, and your DAFs. And then you also have smaller vans. So, like Iveco, for example. And we have custom solutions for each type of vehicle size. So in the big ones, they'll go in the cab at the top. And with the smaller ones, they generally go under the seats or in the back. And so with Caerphilly, we had both types of vehicles, the smaller vans and the big ones. So we're able to work with a company called Halls Electrical, do all the blue light services, and basically adapt regardless of the vehicle that we're deploying on. If that makes sense, Philip.
Sure it does. Another question, are the network providers themselves interested or aware of the information, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so we've had various different operators interested about this. So we've had from basically the operators have different teams. So they have the networking teams, they have their marketing teams, innovation teams. The networking teams are interested from council data that we've worked with, because they can see, as we saw earlier, where are the areas where there's no connectivity, and that's areas where they're losing customers potentially. So if councils like Caerphilly can highlight that to the operators, it gives them a chance to say, actually, well, if there's a lot of people in these locations, let's put a mast up and improve it. And then there's also sort of unrelated to councils, a marketing aspect that the operators are interested in, because with hyperlocal data, we can show on a house by house basis who's the best. So again, if they're trying to showcase that their network is better than other operators, they can use it for marketing materials. So we've in trials with various different operators at the moment and power companies.
Excellent.
And if I can just come in there, just from our point of view as well, when we've been talking to sort of the network providers, it's been very useful for us to be able to talk to them about this data and it really explain on what we're looking for and why we're only looking for pockets and certain members for smaller contracts, or certainly smaller numbers of staff to be on certain providers, because we've got this data. So they were very keen for us to share, what we've learned and how that does affect us as an authority, and then work with us to look at solutions, as we can see, some of the improvements that have already been made, which are great.
Excellent, thank you. I've got a question for Karen, and as is my want, I'm not sure how to articulate it, so please bear with me. There is a question lurking here somewhere. It was just going to be around about the kind of interest and perhaps the impact on those within the authority that have, let's say, benefited from this. Have you have you heard from, say, those on the front line, perhaps the social care workers who are out there now and are feeling more connected? Are you kind of aware of the impact that it is having out there?
Yeah, so George, you done sort of a lot of work with them up front, didn't you, to understand what the problems that they were facing. So George took the brunt of all the frustrations, love him, even though we knew. So now we're actually only starting to migrate. So we're seeing improvements, but we'll be doing another review now shortly in around about 90 days, just to see where we are and the improvements. But it's certainly we're looking at our mobile coverage very differently, and we're also doing a full review on what people are using mobiles for, what they are using data for, and can we do it differently as well. So there's many sort of streams of work going on, just not around the mobile coverage. We've noticed that we've got people who have got laptops, but they've got a mobile phone, but they could have Teams telephony on their laptop. So, you know, we're doing a lot of work in regards to that as well. And certainly Teams telephony has massively helped people in terms of that, because they only need it when they're working. So it's great, and it's a desk phone. We are doing lots of work around it across the board. And we are seeing improvements. It's just the next night, I think in the next review, in around about 90 days, we plan to do it, is hoping that we'll have sort of better conversations, because it's so early days with those people at the moment, and changes.
Oh, thank you. If there are any other questions then for our colleagues, please put them in the chat. We'll give it a minute or so. And if not, then we'll allow everybody to have 20 minutes back. But I think while we're waiting for questions, if there are any more, I mean, I said at the beginning, but it's fascinating to kind of really think about the breadth of this and how many teams can be benefiting, and everything you say. There's another one like, oh yeah, actually these people should be interested in this. I guess it's a challenge for us now after this session to try and make sure that the reach of this information can go beyond kind of necessarily who's just here today, actually, but the benefit of recording such a session is that this can be shown to other people in other departments within local authorities, so that we can generate some of the interest, probably.
That's one of the really positive things to come out of the, because this was a trial given to us by Northern Valleys, and Caerphilly took it up, but with the view to expand it to other local authorities in Wales. And it's been successful because we've had about 5 other councils in Wales either already procure this. So we've had Pembrokeshire, Powys and Ceredigion, and there's a couple more who are about to do work with us as well. But not just in Wales, there's been, you know, English local authorities, about to be Scottish ones. We've also done work in the Bahamas and Canada. So it's had a sort of international reach. And as a Welsh startup, I think that's really important, because there isn't enough innovation in Wales. It's sort of a region that lags behind in that. So when Innovate UK, for example, they look at who they give grants to, Wales is massively underrepresented. So it's been a good success for the Welsh Government, because that was why the Allwch Foundation was founded, and you know, it's bringing jobs to Welsh people. So it's been a good success.
Excellent. Well, that's really good news. So it looks like there's no questions. Obviously, if anybody's got questions after the session, then the chat will stay open. So if you want to put them in, oh, there's questions. Amazing. Did you volunteer? Oh yeah, there we go. Did you volunteer to work in the Bahamas? Who was lucky enough to go and actually do the mapping over there?
So my co-founders, they wouldn't approve me to get the flight over, so we had to send the devices to the government over there, so they got to do it, but there wasn't a free holiday, unfortunately, as much as I would have liked.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. So yeah, obviously, as I say, if you want to add any questions to the chat later on, we can make sure that they reach the right people. Other than that, it just remains for me to say thank you ever so much to both of you for coming and joining us today. It's been a really interesting talk to hear about what's going on. Yes, the recordings will be mailed out to everybody on the call, so if you're interested then. George, I don't know whether it's worth putting some contact details into the chat, actually, in case anybody wants to get in touch with you, and Karen as well, actually.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, of course.
Kind of bounce some questions off you outside of this meeting, so we'll do that. And just like I say, just to say thank you ever so much to you both for coming and sharing that with us today. It's really, really interesting. And our thanks to those of you on the call as well for attending, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Suzanne, and thanks for everyone for joining.
Thank you,
really great
thank you.
to present
Take care.
today.